Okay, so there's definitely a problem right now where every company is trying to be the same. They're trying to take everything that makes them unique and makes them an individual brand and then just decide to make a carbon copy of another company's popular product. And there's no better example of this than KFC, where they had a really popular product for decades with the wedges, but then they decided to get rid of them. Explaining this, we actually have to go back in history to the year 1930 when Colonel Sanders opened up his first restaurant, which was called Harlan Sanders Court and Cafe. And it was definitely not a fast food place where it was meant as a family restaurant serving burgers, ribs, and yes, fried chicken. How the restaurant popular was on Route 25, which was this really big road connecting the country, and because of that, it became this tourist destination for good Southern food. And also at the same time, in 1935, Kentucky's Governor Ruby Laffoon actually decided to make him an honorary colonel, and that's where the name Colonel Sanders came from. Popular for 20 years, but the problem was in the 1950s, there was the building of this national highway known as Interstate 75, and because of that, it wiped out Colonel Sanders' business, where he ended up going into debt and having to sell the business, and he was nearly broke when he was in his early 60s. Because of that, Colonel Sanders was basically in poverty in his 60s, and because of that, he decided to come up with this idea to franchise his name. So what he did was he went to gas stations saying they should set up these cafes and sell fried chicken, burgers, and fries that were all his recipes. The only problem was in the 60s, he couldn't compete with McDonald's, where they were taking over the burger scene, they were taking over the fry scene, so a lot of the early KFCs were actually failing. Things changed for Colonel Sanders luck-wise was when he hired this guy right here, Dave Thomas, who'd later go on to found Wendy's. But before that, he worked for Colonel Sanders running 4 KFCs, and he had this idea to say, hey, we need to get rid of the burgers and fries. Nobody are buying it. We need to be just known for fried chicken. It wasn't actually Colonel Sanders who came up with the idea for the bucket. It was actually the Wendy's founder, Dave Thomas, where he had this idea of saying, hey, we should try to sell people this fast food that's also a meal where you can bring it home and serve a family of 4 with it. So that's why the focus became mashed potatoes, biscuits, and fried chicken. Because of that, for decades, KFC was actually opposed to the idea of doing a fry because they thought that was McDonald's and Burger King's lane and they wanted to stay out of it. But then in 1993, they realized a lot of people were demanding fries, so they came up with the idea of wedges. And the reason for that was it related more to classic Southern food, and also at the same time, they wanted something people could easily dip into the gravy. Then what happened was in the 2000s and 2010s, KFC started to realize they were losing ground to Chick-fil-A because Chick-fil-A went from having only 1,000 stores to 3,000, and also at the same time, their stores made a lot more money at $4.6 million on average per store compared to KFC at 1.3 million. Because that they really reinvent their sandwich game, where not a lot of people know this, but KFC actually did have sandwiches starting in the 1980s, but they never really pushed them out, where it was kind of an afterthought product. But then when drive-thru was getting bigger in the 2010s, they decided to really roll them out with a bunch of different options. Because of that, they thought that the wedges were too heavy to sell with some sort of chicken burger. So because then in the late 2010s, they started experimenting a lot more with fries, which they tried in the 90s, but they didn't really work out that well. So instead they introduced the fries, but the problem was they got rid of the wedges. It was one of the worst decisions the company ever made, especially their reason for it, where they said it was due to COVID and the pandemic in 2020, but that didn't make any sense because they were still doing fries. So people were really upset about them and they didn't bring them back until 5 years later. And with that, I'm Charles Pearl. Subscribe to learn something.